Good morning, everybody. My name is Pejman. Thank you very much for your talk. That was heavy. I guess we don't really know what it feels like until we lose a child to this disease. And the disease of addiction is baffling. It's cunning, baffling, and powerful. I suffered from it for a long time. I recently spoke in California to a group of Iranian parents, about 100 of them. And my mom was in the crowd, and she told me, but you should have said this, and you should have said that, because a lot of these people think that their kids are immune. They're not going to do this stuff. Because like I think somebody said earlier, it's a taboo in our community. And us kids that get into stuff, we know it's a taboo too, so we hide it really well. At least I did. I'm going to be 9 years sober next month. My addiction carried on for probably about 2 decades, over 20 years. I'm Iranian, born in Germany, raised in Utah. So already from the very beginning of my life, I was an oddball. I mean, Muslim parents, our neighbors were all Mormon, everybody was white American, and I had dark-skinned Iranian, and I just felt like an outcast right from the very beginning of my life. And growing up in Utah, early on, I always felt very uncomfortable in my own skin. I could never deal with right here, right now, how I felt. I felt like I did not belong. And, I started experimenting with substances, things that you wouldn't think that kids would put inside their body at a very young age. Of course, traditionally, there's always going to be drinks at weddings, and of course, I went to an Iranian wedding, and there was drinks that were left around on the table, half drank, glasses of champagne, and I found them and put them in my mouth and drank them and got drunk by the end of the night. But it wasn't just there where I got really drunk, and you think the way I got drunk, I threw up in my bed that night, but you think like I would learn from that. Rather, I was looking for that fix at a very early age. At the age of 12, I was mowing lawns for my uncle in Utah, and at the end of the day, I'd gotten this idea from some people in school. They said you could sniff glue and get high. So I went into this shed, and I would take gasoline and sniff the gasoline to get high, which would take me out of my mind. Because I couldn't deal with right here, right now. Which, it's not normal, I don't think, for anybody to be sniffing gasoline to get high. But, and then there were other people in Utah, too, that kind of felt like outcasts as well, that were smoking weed behind the church. And that was this Mormon church behind the school where a few of us would congregate and go and meet, and we would smoke weed. So, this was an ongoing thing, and it wasn't like I was a complete full-blown drug addict overnight. What happened was, we had the opportunity of moving to California when I was 15 years old. I always wanted to get out of Utah. I just felt so out of place there. But when we moved to California, it was like I gravitated right towards people that were doing things. And by the age of 16, we had a so-called friend of mine whose dad was into cocaine. And we found, he was Iranian too. And his dad worked in the hotel industry. We found a jar of cocaine underneath his bed. And back then they didn't have Google, so we didn't know how to do this. We basically went off of what people had told us, but we were taking the cocaine, stealing some of his dad's cocaine, and rocking it up and smoking free-base crack cocaine at the age of 16. This is not normal. The reason my mom was telling me when I was talking in front of those people, she said, "You make it seem like you were the oddball. You make it seem like you were, they don't think their kids are like that." To understand something, when I was in Utah at a very young age, I took state champ in swimming. I was a swimmer. I played basketball. I was an artist. I was a lifeguard. I did a lot of different things in my life that most of your kids were involved in. My grades weren't the best. For some reason, I just did not do well in school, except for certain subjects. But I always felt less than. And so when we moved, at this time when we were growing up in California, my mom, we moved around a lot because she wanted me to have a better education. And we ended up in Irvine, California, where, when I was 17 years old, I had just gotten my driver's license, and I had an old Volkswagen Bug, and I piled a bunch of people into my car, a few friends of mine. We were going to school. I wasn't under the influence that morning. I was completely sober, although I had gotten loaded the night before. And while driving to school, out of nowhere, this kid came on, this 14-year-old kid came out of a bike in the middle of the street, and my car hit him and crashed into another car, and his body was flung over the top of this car and head first into the ground The kid didn't die automatically, but he had blood gushing out of his head. And, you know, I'm a 17-year-old kid. I get out and I go around the car and see this kid just laying face down. So this was a very traumatic experience for me. And what ended up happening was I rebelled against life. I just thought, like, this is, you know, God dealt me a bad hand. You know, I ended up committing other crimes, doing other stupid little things that ended up getting me thrown into juvenile hall. You know, 17-year-old Iranian kid in California in juvenile hall at this point. And they put me in the psych ward amongst other adolescents that had caused death to other people, depending on gang-related crimes or whatever it was. And that, you know, there was a lot of different types of people in there that I just thought, like, how did this all happen? I was a totally normal kid, sort of, a few months ago, and now I'm sitting here in juvenile hall. And I remember thinking to myself, as a young kid in there, that if they think they're disciplining us in here, they're not. They're building criminals. That's what I thought, because everybody around me was all about what gang they're from and what hood they're from. And here, I'm this kid from Irvine, I don't even belong here, and now I have to try to fit in with these guys. So in that time, my parents were getting a divorce, because, you know, they were going through it a lot. They could not get along. And for me, as dysfunctional as our family was, all of the yelling and the commotion and everything that was going on in our house, I didn't want to be the child of divorced parents. For some reason, I just didn't want that. But they did get divorced, and my mom was on the outs, having the people in the community write letters for me, my teachers, the schools, all that. That this is a good kid, this is a big mistake. I was supposed to be in there for a year. I got out early after 5 months. I got out on probation, and while I was in there, I told myself, when I get out, I want to be a good boy. I don't want to use, I don't want to drink. I just want to go to school. I want to do all the things. But you know, the second I got out, already I was greeted at school with certain particular friends, well, let's call them so-called friends, that greeted me with weed and everything, you know, that basically I was high by first period. So parents got divorced. I went to stay with my mom. I would go back and forth between their houses. I would get in an argument with my mom. At the time, I was doing steroids, just wanted to have this nice big buff body because I was all about body, and I had this body dysmorphia. I didn't feel like I looked well, so my friends were doing steroids, so I wanted to get big too. You know, and what had happened was I would go back and forth between my parents' house. I got into it with my dad once. He upset me. You know, he used to be very violent with me, and so I was violent back. Especially on steroids, you have mood swings, and I just lost it, and then I attacked him, which scared him, and he went back to Iran. Left me with a bunch of money, told me to go to Orange Coast College. My mom moved to Los Angeles at the time. So now I'm an 18-year-old kid raising himself. You know, no father figure, no, just my own figure. I have to like learn how to survive. And then you think I took the money and went to school? I attempted to go to school. I couldn't. I was already engulfed in drugs, using everything under the sun, anything I could get my hands on to get me high. And I took the money and I bought a bunch of drugs and started dealing drugs all throughout my 20s. This was an ongoing thing. I was artistic. In my mid-20s, I created a clothing line. I had no business sense, but I had different friends that invested money with me. We made t-shirts, snowboards, skateboards, all these different things. We were selling them across the nation in different stores. Like I said, I have no business sense, and I started getting into methamphetamines, which I wouldn't sleep ever. And all my partners backed away from me. I ran the business into the ground, and everything, basically, it failed. You know, after about 5 years, that business failed. And at that point, you know, I was in my late 20s, and my mom kind of had this, she had a feeling, she's an Iranian mother, she doesn't want to think her son is a drug addict. And of course, every time she would ask me, are you doing drugs, I would deny it. I would tell her I'm appalled that you would ask me such a question. How dare you, right? But she knew, I think in her heart of hearts, she knew something wasn't right with her son. So she would call me and say, Pejman, when you're at home, how come I go to work all day long here in LA just so I can pay for your sister and for me just to survive? You don't even leave the house. I said, well, Mom, I'm selling t-shirts from the house. Just lying, right? And she said, no, something's going on. I'm moving back to Orange County. So she moved back to Orange County. And at that time, you know, things were starting to kind of crumble a little bit for me. I got evicted from my apartment, my car. I lost my car. I had no more money. I had pretty much used up everything that I thought I had accomplished in my drug using and drug dealing career. So I moved back to my mom's house with the intention of wanting to clean up. Once again, the thought of cleaning up and becoming good, I moved into her house, and I got off the heavy stuff. I got off the meth. But I thought weed and alcohol is not my problem. So I failed miserably in trying to stop. For 1, 2, 3 weeks, I would try to stop, and sometimes I'd find myself in the floor of my shower, laying down, crying, just saying, "Get out of me! What's wrong with me? Why can't I stop this stuff?" Right? And then I would still go around and hang out with these certain particular people that were still doing that stuff, and thinking I'm bulletproof, and before you knew it, I was high again. And then I got involved with some very, very shady people. I'm talking like Mexican mafia people that were selling methamphetamines. Before you knew it, I was selling it for them, out of my mom's house. Right? I ended up having, the Orange County Methamphetamine Task Force paid me a little visit. They finally caught up to me. And I found myself back in jail. Now, mind you, when I was in juvenile hall, I remember my mom used to come in there and sit down and caress my back and say, "Pejman, considering the circumstances and what has happened to you now, I want you to know that I come and support you. But if you ever are in a situation like this, ever in your life, for drugs or anything like that, don't even call me." So fast forward now, I'm 30 years old, I'm sitting in jail, and you think I'm going to call my mom? No, I'm not going to call my mom because she told me not to. And these are drug-related crimes, and it's exactly what she said. And of course, 3 days later, they take me in the orange jumpsuit, handcuffed to a bunch of different gangsters, and we're walking into the courtroom, and I look over and see the look on my mom's face. She's sitting there in the courtroom. She was angry and sad all in the same sense. I could just see it in her eyes. That look that a mother gives you when she feels like she's losing her son. So I remember, later in the day, she came with my sister and my aunt to visit me, and my mom wouldn't even talk to me. It was like through one of those plexiglass things with the little phone, and she would put my sister on the phone and relay the messages. All of her anger, she just said, "Tell him this and tell him that." And they came and they broke the lock. The police broke the lock of the door of the house, and then my aunt came and she actually would talk to me, which really was made me feel really good, to be able, because I was broken, You think that would sober me up? I remember I got out of there. I went to. My mom and I went to this sober living. It was being run by an Iranian man in Huntington Beach. I walked in, this little man comes up and he's just talking all about recovery, and I had no clue what he was talking about. And I had no concept of what recovery was. And I didn't like him, and I didn't stay. And I ended up going to another sober living home, which was across the street from my drug dealer's house, because I wasn't done yet. Once my mom paid for the lawyers and got all this stuff, basically I fought this long case that took about 9 months. It was a high-power attorney from the OJ trial that she hired, the enabling mother that she is. I somehow, I didn't beat the case, I just got put on probation, which was kind of a recipe for disaster. It didn't really teach me what I needed to learn through all this. And, I knew how to pull the wool over my mom's eyes, and I ended up moving back into her house. And between the time of, 30 to 35 years old, I was living off of her. My addiction had slowly progressed. As you said, it is very progressive. Once the probation had gotten to informal probation, I was just dabbling a little on the weekends, and before you knew it, it became like almost a daily activity. And then before you knew it, I was, on an hourly basis trying to park my car somewhere just so I could go use. That's what I had become, and I knew deep down inside, something's not right here. I just didn't know how to stop. I did not know how to stop. And so my mom one day, she figured it out. She basically, the gig was up. She called me at the age of 35, said, "I need to meet with you." We went and sat down. She looked at me and she said, "This is what I found, and this is what I know about you." And of course I lied through my teeth again. "Are you kidding me? I'm so appalled. Once again, you're accusing me of this stuff? You don't understand. I'm good. I'm really good. But Pejmanjan, you keep crashing your car. Every other day I'm seeing you hide your car on the corner and there's new dents all over it. And then, there was some nights I would drive my car all the way home, get there, and I couldn't even get out of the car. The door would be open and my one leg would be dangling out of the car, and I'd be passed out. My mom would come out at 5 o'clock in the morning and wake me up and say, "Hassan, it's really sad. It's really sad that somebody has to see their son in such bad shape." And then I crashed into this police officer who lived on my street too at one time. Totaled his car. right? Did that keep me sober? No. I even crashed the next day because I was still thinking about the day before. That's how bad I was. What ended up happening was, my mom kicked me out. It was the best thing that she could ever do for me. She said, go, you don't have any place in my life. She disowned me. So I went homeless and I lived out of my car. My closet was my trunk of my car. I would either sleep in my car or stay at people's houses, my lower companions, and I had become a lower companion. And I remember sometimes thinking, like, I'm a total loser. I'm 35 years old, I'm living in these people's houses that I don't even like, and they don't like me unless I have something to provide them with, whether it be alcohol or drugs. And after having a few conversations with a couple of different people, I made this, decision to get sober. And my eyes, I went and detoxed at somebody's house for about 9 days. I slept, but I would wake up and still smoke weed and still drink. And I had this epiphany, and I thought, I can't do this on my own. Your mom doesn't talk to you. These are your friends. So I called my mom, and she was in Boston at the time with Saeed, and she said, what do you want? And I said, I need help. And she said, well, I'm not going to help you. And I've never had her tell me this, because she usually rescues me, right? And she said, son, I love you, but if I help you one more time, I'm probably going to love you to death, literally, and I can't do that. I said, well, what am I supposed to do? She said, call Saeed, which was her husband. And I said, why do I have to call him? I didn't like him, right? Why do I have to call him? So I called him just because. He told me to call this guy Max, and then Max told me to go to this house in Irvine. It's a treatment center. Just go there. I said, okay. So I went to the house after a few more days of sleeping. And when I knocked on the door of the house, it was the same man from 5 years before with the sober living. His name was Siamak. And of course, truth be told, I went there because it was the Iranian treatment center. I wanted to make my Iranian mother happy, right? And I looked at him, I said, Siamak, I know you. He said, I don't know you. And I said, no, I met you 5 years ago. You had a sober living. And he said, well, you know how many people I've seen in the last 5 years, Tajwan? And I said, how many? He said, 1,000 at least. You know how many people stay sober? Not many. Maybe just a few, a handful. So I stayed at Siamak's house. I walked in, they did the intake. Saeed came too, and during the intake they're talking about this is a 6-month to a 1-year program. And I'm like, that's heavy. I mean, I think 30 days would be adequate, like Britney Spears style, in and out. And like I had a life. I'm living out of my car, and I'm trying to negotiate my time of being in treatment. So I ended up staying for 6 months. What had happened in there was 2 things that really opened my eyes. One was that I still had a reservation to use, but I told that deep, dark secret to somebody else, and they told me their deep, dark secret. And one night, when the counselor found out, we were processed at a group that I lied through my teeth throughout that whole group. And I remember thinking, like, you're still doing it. You're still lying. Even in rehab, you're still lying. A few weeks later, but I told the counselor later that night, I told him the truth, which is something was really hard for me to do, was be honest with him and with myself. 2 weeks later, and my mom wouldn't visit me, which was a good thing, because if she'd have come, I would have tried to fool her one more time, which was killing me. I was like a puppy dog. On visiting day on Sundays, I would look out the window and just wait for her car to show up, and she wouldn't come, and all the other people's parents would come see them, and I was dying inside. But when she came on this particular day. They had a family group where it was a whole bunch of Iranians all in a huge circle. And my counselor he told me we're going to do a psychodrama. And they took somebody's kid, a 12-year-old, put him on the ground, laid him down, and put a sheet over his body. And he said, this is going to represent the body of the kid that you hit on the bike. Walk around the room, talk about that day, and tell us your experience and what had happened. It was like the most traumatic experience that happened to me in my life, and I've been masking my emotions and fear with drugs because I didn't know how to process any of this. So I walked around, I talked all about it. Then he said, now get down on your knees and put your hand on this is the corpse of David Lydell. And I put my hand on him. He said, now tell him what you feel. And I told him, I'm so sorry that you lost your life because I can't believe that this had happened. And he said, now tell him what happened to your life. I said, I don't have a life. I haven't had a life. I don't even know what having a life is. I said, so what do you want to do different? Are you ready to make a commitment? And this wasn't me to talk this way, but what came out of my mouth was I want to help every single addict, alcoholic, of every race, creed, and color and age that I come into contact with for the rest of my life. I'm thinking, did that just come out of my mouth? And then I thought for a second, my mom is sitting here, my sponsor's sitting here, all my peers are sitting here, my counselor's sitting here. If I lie one more time, if I don't keep my word, who am I? What am I? What am I all about? So I made the commitment, and the next day I felt like 1,000 pounds were lifted off my back. And I went to school. And I went to Saddleback College, and I graduated top of my class, 4.0 student. When I opened my computer one day, I looked at it said Pejman Alagaman in Dean's list. And I'm like, who's Dean? I don't even know. You know, that's how disconnected I was from education. But what ended up happening is I started working in treatment centers. I worked in an adolescent facility with 14 to 17-year-old young men who were as he was saying, they were getting their hands on their parents' Oxycontins and smoking them. I've never heard of people smoking pills. But that's what kids are doing these days, you know? People cutting themselves to overcome their pain that they have within. I never had heard of anything like this. I got high to overcome my pain, my emotional pain. So basically working in that place was an eye-opening experience because there was a bunch of little Pejmans all around me that reminded me of me. And they were difficult, and we had power struggles. There was even a little Iranian kid in there that he got in my face a couple of times, and all I could tell him is I love you because I thought God was looking at a little version of me. And after that I ended up working in a couple of different treatment centers, some high-end, some low-end. I was a sober living manager. I ran houses. I ran a house in Newport Beach for 2 years on the water. I could have never afforded to live in Newport Beach. It was a $2 million house. This treatment center put me up in. And I watched 200 men come through that place, 200 different types of men. Guess how many stayed sober? One. I watched a few of them attempt to get sober for a while. 1 out of 200 people. And I still know them to this day. Then I moved to Los Angeles to open some high-end sober livings. One in Westwood, one in Bel Air. And everything that I had learned in all the different treatment centers that I worked in, I basically brought to the table. I was the program director, I was live-in. We had a very strict program. I did not mess around. We had all kinds of people come through, majority Iranian. Some very spoiled, rich, rotten brats from very wealthy families. They were the most difficult ones, were the ones that came from money. And what we did there was we would not allow anybody to have any kind of contact with the outside world. No Facebook, no television, no telephone, no texting, nothing. Until they were done with their 4th step, and I had to know who their sponsor was. I'm very tough. And I'll finish with this. There was this one kid that came through there. He was the most difficult person I've ever experienced in my life. He had already left Siamak's house, the same place I got sober. He was kicked out because he snuck heroin in there. And when he came to our doorstep, he'd gone to his house overnight and his parents found him drunk and on benzos and all different types of things. Brought him to LA, dropped him off on our front doorstep. We got home from a meeting. I picked him up off the doorstep and called him, let's go in the house. Brought him inside, sat him down, and his eyes were all over the place. Oh my God, I'm back in sober living. I don't want to be in sober living. And for a good 1, 2, 3 weeks, all this guy did, he just kept lying and lying and lying and lying. Everything he would say, you could just tell. He was a very sloppy liar. I would tell him, Arya, if you're gonna lie, just make sure that I believe you, because I'm a professional liar. Don't do that stuff around here. I said, I think it's gotten to the point that when your lips move, you're lying. So one night, he was way out of line, and I sat him down and I said, listen, we're going to have we call them shotgun groups. Sometimes it was like a little mini process group. It was like 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. I said, sit down right here for a second. I go, tell me, I'm going to give you the opportunity and chance for once in your life to tell me the truth. And I'm just going to ask you one thing. If I could give you anything on earth right now, what would you want? He said, you want me to tell you the truth, Pejman? I would want to do heroin. I would want heroin. I said, do you? Okay, let's go. I took him in my car. We went from Westwood over to downtown, off 6th and Alvarado, Skid Row. And as we went into the neighborhood, he said, where are you taking? This is a kid from San Clemente, California. This is like a surfer kid. He does not belong in this neighborhood. If you looked at the neighborhood, it looked like the Night of the Living Dead. People staggering around. It was really bad. Rough neighborhood. And he goes, what are you going to do? I said, well, you wanted heroin, right? He goes, yeah. I go, then get out of my car. He said, you're going to just drop me off here? I said, yeah, you want heroin? Go. So he got out of the car, went across the street. A bunch of guys came and surrounded him, and he started handing out cigarettes and just, Pej, please get me out of here. I got scared for it. I turned the car around and went over to him and rolled the window down. I go, what's up? He said, please take me home. I said, okay, get in the car. So we went for a drive. I go, listen, first of all, you don't have a home. The sober living home that you stay with at our house, we have rules. You follow the rules. You get honest with yourself. I said, he said, well, I mean, what is it going to take? And I said, it's going to take a lot. But you see all these people on the streets here? I know a lot of them have mental deficiencies. But some of these people didn't have mental deficiencies that don't, but they had choices and chances. And in life, God only gives you so many choices and chances. And if you use them up, this is your future. Is this what you want? If this is what you want, you can just stay here. He said, no, please take me home. So I took him back to Westwood. The second we drove into the Westwood neighborhood, he said, oh my God, this looks way different than that neighborhood. I like this. And you know what ended up happening with Arya is the next day, well, he told me that night, I want to get honest with you, Pejman, but please give me a couple of days. I said, I don't have a problem with that. So the next day, a couple of days later, he came up to my office and knocked on the door. He came and said, I want to talk to you. Let's go for a walk. We went in the neighborhood and we went for this nice, spiritual walk. And he says to me, the way he was talking, for once in his life, I thought, he's telling the truth. And why would he told the truth. He said, I did sneak heroin into Sienna's house because he was denying that the whole time. And all these other things. I lied about this, I lied about that. And I just knew for once in his life the kid's getting honest with me. And what ended up happening, he asked me to be a sponsor. And he said, please take me through the steps, the 12 steps. I took him through the 12 steps and the 12 traditions and the concepts and the principles. The kid he's transformed. He's changed. He ran that house. After I left, he ended up managing that house, and right now he's working in a treatment center in Orange County near me. And so when it comes to addiction, addictive personalities and behaviors start from a very young age. They can start with video games. When you see kids playing games too much, that could turn into other addictions, for sure. It happens all the time. I have literally had clients in treatment that came in because they have gaming addictions. I've had sex addicts. I've had gamblers, gambling addicts. And at this point, and sort of like this gentleman said, it's an epidemic right now. Heroin is at an all-time high. Most of my clients in the treatment center I work in Orange County right now are between the ages of 18 to 25, heroin addicts, and it all started with pills that they found in their cabinets, be it was their grandmas or their parents. It could be oxys, it could be anything. That's what's going on right now. And nobody is immune. It's very easy to addiction. You know how many, especially in the Iranian community out there, they have 12-step meetings just for Iranians with the same readings and the same shares. I used to sit there and listen to them and think, that's exactly what we say in the American meetings, And it could get really ugly. So there's a lot of signs to look for. Definitely bad grades. Well, anytime somebody gets put on academic probation, I'm speaking for myself, in college, there's definitely something going on. And that's what was going on with me. I got put on academic probation twice and then kicked out of art school. I'm an artist. So it says a lot. Thank you. I think the questions are at the end.
Oh, yeah.
After Joey, if you have questions, then after Joey, this presentation, if you have questions, you can ask.
Hi, everybody. Is everybody okay? Need a break? Stand up and stretch for a minute? It's been an hour. Okay. Yes, sir.